The purpose of today's video is to help you reframe the way we think about ADD and ADHD. I've spent much of my adult life working with children, many of whom were navigating the aftermath of trauma. I've witnessed a wide range of behaviors, some confusing, some challenging, and some heartbreaking. What I've learned is this: behavior is never random. It's a language. Every action, whether it looks like defiance, distraction, or dishonesty, is a child's attempt to meet a need, whether real or perceived, that they don't have the words to express. When we hear the word diagnosis, it is easy to assume that it means we've identified what's wrong with a child. But many diagnoses don't actually explain why something is happening. Like migraines or digestive issues like IBS, they are classifications. A migraine diagnosis, for example, doesn't mean that the brain is broken. It simply means a cluster of symptoms that tend to appear together. When the migraines improve, it's usually because something underneath is addressed, not because the label itself changed. Gut issues work the same way. They describe what we're seeing, but not the cause. ADD and ADHD belong in this same category. They are not a what's wrong diagnosis. They're a description of patterns. Difficulty focusing, restlessness, impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, that when they show up together, receive a name. When we understand a diagnosis as a description rather than a verdict, it can shift the question of what's wrong with this child to what is this child responding to and how better can we support them. Honestly, I could talk to you all day about the things that pile on to make these challenges harder. But instead, I've chosen 3 key factors that, when challenged, can make the biggest positive change for these kids. The first topic is screens. Screens plus kids equals a nervous system overload. And children today are exposed to more screens than any generation in history. Screens provide rapid visual stimulation, constant novelty, instant reward, and endless dopamine loops. Young nervous systems were not designed for this level of stimulation. Screens are not natural, and they train the brain to expect constant change, instant feedback, and high stimulation. When a child spends hours engaging in fast-moving visuals and rapid rewards, quieter environments like classrooms, books, or even conversations can feel intolerable by comparison. This doesn't mean that the child can't focus. It means their nervous system has been conditioned to a very different standard of stimulation. Screens change the expectation of focus. After prolonged screen exposure, slower-paced tasks feel boring. Sustained attention feels uncomfortable, stillness feels unnatural, and emotional regulation becomes harder. We're asking children to suddenly perform in an environment that feels neurologically underwhelming compared to their digital world. Later, we'll circle back to address some very real solutions and shifts that can be made to address these areas. But for now, on to topic number 2, and it's a big one: diet and nutrition. Food directly affects brain chemistry, energy regulation, mood stability, and focus and impulse control. Yet diet is rarely addressed meaningfully in ADD and ADHD conversations. The brain is an organ, and just like any other organ, it requires proper nutrition to function properly. And the modern American diet is typically high in refined carbohydrates, high in added sugars, high in artificial ingredients, and low in key micronutrients. This combination creates energy spikes, crashes, and inflammation, which can all impact behavior. Poor diet can also lead to blood sugar instability, which can cause irritability, hyperactivity, poor concentration, emotional volatility, and fatigue that looks like inattention. These patterns are often mistaken as behavioral disorders. But this is not a character flaw. It's physiological. Stable blood sugar supports stable focus. Certain nutrition deficiencies are often linked to attention and mood challenges, including iron, magnesium, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids. These deficiencies don't cause ADD and ADHD, but they can intensify the symptoms. And many recent studies have begun to show a link between certain gene mutations and ADD/ADHD, particularly the MTHFR gene. When the brain lacks essential nutrients, self-regulation becomes difficult, particularly under stress and sensory overload. In many cases, the concern is not calorie intake, but whether the quality of the nutrition supports healthy brain function. Again, I'll circle back to provide some steps that you can take to encourage positive change in this area. But first, we'll hit the last topic: school. Most school environments require long periods of sitting, minimal movement, sustained attention, reduced sensory input, compliance over curiosity, and this conflicts with how many children are biologically wired to learn. Children are not naturally sedentary learners. Historically, learning involved movement, imitation, exploration, and hands-on encouragement. In young bodies, especially boys and sensory-seeking children, to sit still for hours is a relatively modern demand. And when a child struggles in this environment, we often label that child instead of questioning the structure. Common classroom behaviors that trigger concern are fidgeting, talking out of turn, difficulty staying seated, daydreaming, emotional outbursts. These are often signs of unmet developmental needs, not defiance or disorder. Again, this doesn't mean that support isn't needed. It simply means that context matters. So what happens when we put them all together? High screen exposure, poor quality diets, and restrictive learning environments. You create the perfect conditions for attention and regulation struggles. In this context, ADD and ADHD symptoms are not mysterious. They're understandable responses to overstimulated nervous systems, undermoved bodies, and undernourished brains. So the question now is not what's wrong with this child, but what is this child responding to? If we understand ADD and ADHD instead of defects as signals, instead of failures as responses, and an invitation to change the environment, we can then support the child's body, environment, and nervous system, and often see behaviors improve, sometimes drastically. So what are some steps we can take? What does that mean for screens? Helpful boundaries include no screens before school, no screens during meals, screen-free time before bed. Prioritizing creative play, less stimulation can help reset attention. It's about having a plan for screens, about having rules and regulations around screen usage. It doesn't mean removing them entirely, unless that's what you decide to do. It's about creating space for the nervous system to downshift. When screens are reduced, parents often notice better sleep, less irritability, improved focus, and fewer emotional meltdowns. Screens will always be a part of their future, but childhood is brief. Protecting space for play, boredom, and connection helps to ensure that screens remain a tool, not the focus of their attention. On to diet. One of the most effective places to start is by gently shifting your child's diet so it supports rather than challenges their physical and neurological needs. This often begins with learning what your child's specific needs are, which may include guidance from a nutritional professional. Simple changes can make a meaningful difference, such as prioritizing protein and healthy fats at meals, reducing added or artificial sugars, and moving away from heavily processed foods. These shifts help to stabilize energy levels and prevent the blood sugar crashes that often show up as ADD or ADHD symptoms. Parents frequently notice improvement relatively quickly, and the added benefit is that these changes tend to support the health of the entire family. Choosing more whole foods, limiting artificial dyes and additives, and being more mindful of the oils used, maintaining consistent meal times, sitting together at the table, and encouraging hydration can help to create a nutritional environment that supports regulation. Remember, parents, you don't need to overhaul everything at once. Even small changes can make noticeable differences. Okay, lastly, school. This can be a tough one to talk about because not only is it a place where your kids spend a lot of time, it's one where they spend it without the parents. But it does give wonderful opportunity for conversations and solution-based creative thinking with your child's teacher. A few small adjustments into the school day can benefit all the students, not just the ones with ADD and ADHD diagnosis. Discuss movement. Movement supports focus. Outdoor play, short movement breaks, fidget tools, learning while standing or moving, jumping jacks, wiggle it out breaks. Many children focus better after moving. It helps to regulate their nervous systems and burn off excess stress hormones. For some kids, sitting still is the hardest part of learning. This is not about blame. It's about understanding. Support, not punishment, creates change. Parents didn't cause this. Children aren't broken. When we address the foundational needs, many behaviors soften naturally. Sometimes the most powerful intervention is not a prescription, but a better environment. When we begin here, with environment, movement, nutrition, sleep, we often see meaningful changes before medication is ever considered. I know that changing the way the world understands ADD and ADHD is not something that will happen overnight, if at all, but it is possible to change the way our slice of the world understands it. Too often, a child receives a diagnosis, and the next step is prescription, followed by an unspoken expectation that the child will now behave normally. This can be a dangerous and inaccurate way of understanding medication. While medication may reduce certain symptoms for some children, it does not replace the need to understand why those symptoms exist, nor does it remove our responsibility to support the child's environment, nourishment, and nervous system. When medication is viewed as a cure rather than a tool, we risk missing the child behind the diagnosis. Change isn't always loud. Sometimes it starts by choosing to see the child differently and responding accordingly.